Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se Guru Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Dham ki jai. Yamuna Mai ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shanvadi Paschada Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, everybody. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, The Lord in the Heart, Text 19. And if anyone's getting a feeling of deja vu, that's because last week on Saturday, I mistakenly gave class on this verse. It was supposed to be text 13, and it was supposed to be actually His Grace Dronacharya Prabhu, but mistakenly on my part, I stole his class and then gave class on the wrong verse out of sequence. So now we're revisiting it. Text 19 again. Itam munis tu paramedvyavastito Vijnana Drikvirya Surandita Shaya Swaparshnina Pidya Gudam Tato Nilam Staneshu Satsuna Mayejita Klama Itam munis tu paramedvyavastito Vijnana Drikvirya Surandita Shaya Swaparshnina Pidya Gudam Tato Nilam Staneshu Satsuna Mayejita Klama Itam munis tu paramedvyavastito Vijnana Drikvirya Surandita Shaya Swaparshnina Pidya Gudam Tato Nilam Staneshu Satsuna Mayejita Klama. Others chant, please.
Itam munistu paramed vyavastito Vijnana Drigvirya Surandhitasaya Swaparnispadya Gudam Tato Nilam Staneshu Satunamayesh Chita Kalamaha. Sorry. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Itam munistu paramedvyavastito Vijnana Drigvirya Suranditashya Tasyaha Swaparshanina Pitya Gudam Tato Anidam Staneshu Satshunamai Jita Kalamaha. Hare Krishna.
Itam munistu parmad bhayasthito Vijnano Drigvirya Surandhita Shaya Saparshina Padya Gudam Tato Anilam Taneshu Satsunamajaya Jita Klamaha. Hare Krishna.
इत्थं मुनिस्तु परमे व्यवस्थितो विज्ञानदृग्वीर्यसुरन्धिताशया स्वपार्ष्णिप्रीतिगुणं ततो निलं स्थानेषु सत्सु नमये चित्तक्लमा
इदं मुनीतपरमवेद्यास्पतितो विज्ञानदृग्विर्यासुरन्दितसया सपर्स्नेत्या पुदं ततो निलं तनेषु सत्नु समेतिताक्लमा.
Okay, I'm sorry, does someone else want to chat? Okay, word for word translation. Itam, thus by Brahman realization. Muni, the philosopher. Tu, but. Uparamet, should retire. Vyavastita, well situated. Vijnanadrik, by scientific knowledge. Virya, strength. Surandita, well regulated. Ashaya, aim of life. Swaparshnina, with the heel of one's foot. Apidya, by blocking. Gudam, the air hole. Tata, thereafter. Anilam, life air. Staneshu, in the places. Satsu, 6 primary. Unamayet, must be lifted. Jita klama, by extinguishing material desires. Translation. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. There are many Duratmas who claim to have realized themselves as Brahman and yet are unable to conquer material desires. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 54, it is clearly explained that an absolutely self-realized soul becomes completely aloof from all material desires. Material desires are based on the false ego of the living being and are exhibited by his childish and useless activities to conquer the laws of material nature and by his desire to lord it over the resources of the 5 elements. With such a mentality, one is led to believe in the strength of material science with its discovery of atomic energy and space travel by mechanical vehicles. And by such tiny advancements in material science, the false egoist tries to challenge even the strength of the Supreme Lord, who can finish all man's tiny endeavors in less than a second. The well-situated self, or Brahman realized soul, perfectly understands that the Supreme Brahman, or the personality of Godhead, is the all-powerful Vasudeva, and that he, the self-realized living being, is a part and parcel of the Supreme Whole. As such, his constitutional position is to cooperate with him in all respects in the transcendental relation of the served and the servitor. Such a self-realized soul ceases to exhibit his useless activities of attempting to lord it over material nature. Being scientifically well-informed, he fully engages himself in faithful devotion to the Lord. The expert yogi, who has thoroughly practiced the control of the life air by the prescribed method of the yoga system, is advised to quit the body as follows. He should plug up the evacuating hole with the heel of the foot and then progressively move the life air on and on to 6 places: the navel, abdomen, heart, chest, palate, eyebrows, and cerebral pit. Controlling the life air by the prescribed yogic process is mechanical, and the practice is more or less a physical endeavor for spiritual perfection. In olden days, such practice was very common for the transcendentalist, for the mode of life and character in those days was favorable. But in modern days, when the influence of Kali age is so disturbing, practically everyone is untrained in this art of bodily exercise. Concentration of the mind is more easily attained in these days by the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The results are more effective than those derived from the inner exercise of the life air. Itam munis tu paramed vyavastito Vijnanajik virya surandita shaya Soparshnina pidya gudantato nilam Staneshu satsuna mayajita klama. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachayane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Again, an interesting verse in an interesting section of the Bhagavatam. Something interesting for me personally, since I gave class on this verse last week, and then I realized I was giving class on the same verse again this week. It was an interesting exercise to look at the verse again and say, okay, whatever I spoke on next week, but what can I think of? Can I think of see a new angle or see new lights or make different points? And so that was personally for me, that was a nice exercise to do that, to look at the verse and say, okay, let's examine something different about it. And you'll be the judge of whether that endeavor was worthwhile or not, but we'll see. So one interesting word, I'll start by focusing at the beginning of the verse, itamunis tu paramed. This uparamed is an interesting word. Uparamed means to give up, to renounce, or to cease some activities, to give something up. And Prabhupada begins the purport by explaining this point, that if you claim to be realized, if you think that you're some kind of self-realized person or spiritually realized or some vimukta manina, you think within your mind you've become liberated or you've become Brahman realized, but you haven't give up sense gratification, then that person is a duratma. And also I think in yesterday's purport also, yes, he also used that term criticizing these duratmas. Dura means hard. So duratma means like a hard-hearted person or a coarse person or a small-minded person or a cheating person. This is a duratma. So if you think you're realized, if you're searching after, not only if you're claiming to be self-realized, but if you're searching after self-realization, but you're unwilling to do this uparamet, to withdraw yourself from sense gratification, to pratyahara, to withdraw the senses from the objects of enjoyment of this world, if you're unwilling to restrict your sense gratification in any way, that this is great cheating and what's the word I'm looking? You're sabotaging your self-realization. One time Prabhupada was asked about these claims. Oh, if you chant Hare Krishna, immediately you're purified, immediately you're liberated. But we see that sometimes you chant and you're not liberated. So how is that? And Srila Prabhupada explained, He said, just like if you're starting a fire, if the wood is very dry, then as soon as you touch a spark to that dry wood, you immediately have a blazing fire. But if the wood is wet, then lighting it is very difficult. So he said, so this is the process. You're lighting the wood, but then you're also sprinkling water on the wood. So you're doing it at the same time. If you're lighting and sprinkling and lighting and sprinkling and lighting and sprinkling, then you're not going to be make very much progress in lighting your fire. You need to withdraw the moisture. Uparamed, you need to withdraw the moisture, take out the moisture from the wood. Then as soon as you touch a spark to it, you'll have a blazing fire. And if you go on sprinkling water, which is engaging in sense gratification, then you'll just be smoldering and maybe get a little smoke, and you won't get the blazing fire that you're after. So Prabhupada, this very word, this exact word, uparamed, is also used in Bhagavad Gita. And actually, there's so many nice parallels between this chapter and specifically the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is also about dhyana yoga. So naturally, you would find these parallels. So text 25 of chapter 6 is interesting. Shanai Shanar Uparamed, that same word again, uparamed. Budya driti grihitaya atmasamstam manakritva na kinchid api chintayet. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Uparamed, Prabhupada translates in the word for word translation as hold back. So by your intelligence, by your conviction, by your practice, you're holding back the senses from the material sense objects. And in that way, you're fixing the mind and the heart in self-realization by this uparamed. So this is interesting, the parallel here, this use of the word uparamed, and saying the same thing. And Prabhupada explains in the purport. By proper conviction and intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activities. This is called pratyahara. So this is called pratyahara. Uparamed means pratyahara, withdrawing the senses, withdrawing the mind from the sense objects. And of course, this whole section of the Bhagavatam is in response to Parikshit Maharaj asking Shukadev Goswami about this process of pratyahara and dharana, withdrawing from the sense objects, and dharana, and what to fix the mind on. What's the benefit? What's the process of fixing the mind, and what's the object upon which one should fix one's mind? Also, some nice things. That verse in Bhagavad Gita starts off sanai sanai, which means little by little, step by step, one step at a time. Prabhupada talks about like the inchworm. If you've seen like a little caterpillar, the inchworm, we call the inchworm. And when it's moving, it puts its front forward and feels, and as soon as the front is well situated, it grafts on with the front, and then the tail end follows. And then once the tail end is situated, then again, the front end reaches out and searches and finds a footing and then grasps. So like that, step by step, one at a time. This is Sanai Sanai. And going back just a few verses to text 13, which was the verse I was supposed to speak on last week, says the same thing. Ekaika songani dhyanu bhavayet. Ekaika so means eka aso means one by one, step by step, one after another. Ekaika songani dhyanu bhavayet. One after another, you advance like that. Where's the translation? Oh, yes, this is describing meditation on the Lord, starting with the Lord's lotus feet and moving up. And again, the same idea, one by one, step by step, you meditate on the Lord's lotus feet and you become fixed. And then you meditate upon the Lord's legs and his waist and his abdomen, moving up like that. step by step, ekaika so, or sanai sanai, in this verse, in meditation, step by step, gradually, you're moving up. So anyway, this is the gradual process of spiritual advancement, pratyahara, and it has to include pratyahara. It has to be based upon pratyahara, withdrawing the mind from the sense objects. Without that, it's simply cheating. And not only withdrawing the senses from the sense objects, that like you're sitting in meditation and you're not engaging your senses in any material activities, but even the mind and the heart within also have to be withdrawn from the sense objects. Bhagavad Gita says, karmenjiyani samyam ya aste manasak smaran, indriyartan vimudhatma mityacharasa uchite. That even someone controls his external senses, in karmendriyani samyama, even you're controlling your karmendriyas, that you're not misusing your senses externally. But ya aste manasak smaran, but inside manasak smaran, within your mind internally and within your heart, you're still attached to and still contemplating sense objects. Then what does Krishna say? Mityacharasa uchyate. I don't know if the English word myth comes from this Sanskrit mithya, but mithya means a cheater. A cheater means someone who's telling a false story, like in English, a myth. Maybe they're connected, maybe not. But mityachara means someone who behaves in this cheating way, means that externally you're controlling the senses, but internally you're still meditating on the sense objects. This is also cheating. This is also a duratma. And this also equally sabotages your spiritual life by, even if you're controlling the external senses, but you're not controlling the mind and the senses within. And why is this? Because even if you control the senses, but if your heart is not pure, and everything depends on the condition of your mind and the condition of your heart. If your heart is not pure, then even external purity won't ultimately benefit you. Just like in the seventh canto, at the beginning of the seventh canto. Oh no, at the beginning of the sixth canto, I think it is. After hearing about the hellish planets in the fifth canto, Parikshit Maharaj says, I don't think that this material process of doing sins and then atoning and then being rectified is very good. And he said, it's just like a big forest of bamboo, that if you have a big bamboo forest, and if there's a fire and you burn down all the bamboo forest, you may say, oh, the forest is gone. Just like if you withdraw the external senses, you may think, oh, look at me, I'm so austere, I'm so powerful, I'm so self-controlled. But what happens after the bamboo forest is burned down? All it takes is a few days, and from the roots underground, they start sprouting again. And before you know it, you have a forest twice as dense as before, because the problem hasn't been eradicated at the root. The roots haven't been, or anyone who's gardened know this. You pull a weed, but if you don't pull it up in such a way that you extract the whole root, then in a couple of days, the weed is sprouting again and choking your vegetable plants. So this is one reason why this superficial renunciation is not ultimately beneficial. And related to it, the other reason, which is almost the same reason, is that such renunciation won't last. You may think, oh, I'm so austere. Look at me, I'm so austere. But if your senses are not controlled inside, if your mind is not controlled, then that external renunciation also will not last. You'll be sitting in meditation, thinking you're so renounced and so austere, but then Menaka or some other Apsara from the heavenly planets comes dancing by, and your meditation is finished. Because the heart is not purified. So therefore, actual renunciation that encompasses not just the senses, but the mind and the heart are required. And this is only possible through Krishna consciousness. The only real renunciation comes through Krishna consciousness. The vimukta manina, the imagined liberation, which even it comes, what's the aruya kritrena, it comes with great endeavor, very hard and very intense and very severe austerities, but that won't last if it's devoid of Krishna consciousness. Why? Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinam raso varjam raso pyasya param drishkranda vartate. Actual renunciation is only possible when you have a higher taste. And the higher taste is not austerities. The higher taste is not fruitive activities. The higher taste is not impersonal meditation. The higher taste only comes from the reservoir of all taste. Akila Rasamrita Murti. Krishna in the beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is called Akila Rasamrita Murti. That means he's the personification of all taste. So if we want a higher taste, that only comes by engagement in Krishna consciousness. And then your renunciation is steady, because you're not doing it just by force. You're not doing it just by gritting your teeth. Just like sometimes people, I had a friend, a devotee friend, who before he was a devotee, he was addicted to smoking cigarettes. And he used to tell me how hard it was quitting, that you just had to, I'm not going to smoke. I'm not going to smoke. And even the more you thought about it, it actually became harder because you were thinking about it so much. But by getting a higher taste, it's possible to give up these things. And this gives the actual firm, solid renunciation, not this false renunciation that is underlaid with material desires and which won't last, but real renunciation. This is called, Srila Rupa Goswami describes prapanchikataya budhya hari sambhana vastuna. Prapanchikataya budhya. What's the proper intelligence to have real renunciation? Hari sambhanu vastuna. To see that everything is connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When you understand everything as Krishna and Krishna's energy, then there's no more question of artificial renunciation. You automatically see that this is Krishna's energy, and therefore you know how to use and engage in that thing properly without thinking this is for my enjoyment. Prapanchikataya budhya hari sambhana vastuna. And the other side, mumuksha bi parityago vairagyam palgu katyate. And the other kind of renunciation, this superficial renunciation, without Krishna consciousness, without understanding sambandha gyan, how everything is related to Krishna, this is very meager and very weak and very superficial renunciation called palgu vairagya. Palgu means very small, very insignificant. And there's also a story behind it. The Palgu also means the Palgu River. There's a river that flows through Bihar province. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited there when he went to do the pinda for the passing of his father, and he went to Gaya. I think the Palgu River flows by there at the place where there's the temple with the impression of Lord Vishnu's feet. And also when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did his tour of all the holy places in India, he also went to this Palgu Tirtha to visit. So there's a story from the Ramayana about this Palgu River. It was a very beautiful, broad, sacred river at that time. And even at that time, 2 million years ago, it was a recommended place for doing pinda to the forefathers. So when Ram and Sita and Lakshman were wandering in the forest, they went to this Palgu River in the course of their wanderings to offer the pinda to their father, Maharaj Dasarat. So they were preparing to do it. So Ram and Lakshman went to bathe in the river, and they were away bathing in the river for a long time. And so Sita was sitting there on the bank of the river, playing or meditating or passing her time, whatever, when all of a sudden, out from the river came Maharaj Dasarat himself. Now, Dasarat Maharaj had already passed away, so he returned from death and appeared before Sita and said, "My daughter, I have come to receive my pinda," the oblations to the forefathers. And she said, "Oh, please, Ram and Lakshman, your sons have just gone to bathe. They'll be back very soon." And he insisted, "No, I cannot wait. Immediately at this moment, I want my pinda." And she said, "But I have nothing to offer. I haven't collected the fruits and roots and leaves and, whatever jungle or forest foods they were collecting." And he says, "It doesn't matter. You must offer me some sand from this bank of the holy river Sarayu." So she did. She offered the sand, and Dasarat Maharaj was very pleased and blessed her and disappeared back into the river. And then after that, Ram and Lakshman came back from their bathing and said, "Okay, it's time to perform the Pinda ceremony." And Sita said, "Oh, I've already done." And he said, "What do you mean?" And she explained what had happened. And Ram and Lakshman said, "That's impossible. That didn't happen. He came when we weren't even there, and he accepted sand as Pinda. That's not possible." So Sita insisted, "No, it's true. And all these witnesses are here that saw it." And she named the Ashwata tree and the Palgu River. And I can't remember, she mentioned some other, maybe the air and the sky or like that. She mentioned all the 5 different witnesses. So all of those witnesses, including the Palgu River, they were all afraid to disagree with Lord Ram. So they actually lied and did not support Sita's claim that Maharaj Dasarat had come. Only the Ashwata tree asserted that, yes, I saw this happen, but all the other witnesses, including the Palgu River, denied her claim. And because of that, Sita cursed the Palgu River that you're going to stop flowing as a mighty river. You'll just flow underground, and on the surface, it'll just be desert, dry sand dunes. So this is the Palgu River. So when we say, so this is also related when you say Palgu Vairagya, that's what this means, is superficial, cheating, lying, imitation, and very meager. Like you go to the mighty sacred river, the Palgu River, and you go, but there's no water. So similarly, this renunciation, this false renunciation, but there's no reality to it. There's no substance to it, and there's no lasting effect to it. So this is how in any spiritual life, including in bhakti, especially in bhakti, controlling the senses must be done, but there's a technique for it to be done properly. Also in this connection, in today's purport, Prabhupada brings up Bhagavad Gita 1854, that Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na shochati na kangshati samaksaveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. In the purport, let's see, he says, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly explained that an absolutely self-realized soul becomes completely aloof from all material desires. So Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na shochati na kangshati. One who's Brahma Bhuta, one who's actually spiritually situated, na shochati na kangshati. He has no more hankering and no more lamenting. He doesn't desire any sense gratification, any positive sense gratification for himself, and he doesn't avoid any negative sense gratification, any painful or distressful situations. He's completely immune to both. Why? Again, just like by attaining the higher taste, so Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. Prasanatma means you're completely happy and completely joyful and satisfied in devotional service or in spiritual life. Therefore, you're able to have this mentality of nashochati nakangshati, of no more hankering, no more lamenting. And when your mind and your heart is fixed like that, no more hankering and no more lamenting, then of course controlling the external senses becomes the easiest thing in the world. It's simply an automatic consequence of that internal situation. No more hankering, no more lamenting. And you can't have Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma without controlling the senses, and you can't have controlling the senses without being Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. You can't have one without the other. And when you have that, Samaksaveshu Bhuteshu, and your consciousness is completely equipoised, completely balanced, then Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. Then the gain, the goal of devotional service to Krishna becomes available. So all these three things, spiritual realization, controlling the mind and senses, and engaging in devotional service, all of these three things are interdependent. You can't have one without the other. And if you engage in devotional service to Krishna, then automatically you're the topmost spiritually realized person. Automatically you have full happiness in spiritual life, and automatically your senses are completely controlled. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. This is also interesting parallel. Labhate Param means you attain the highest thing, which is Mad Bhaktim. Krishna says, Mad Bhaktim, my devotional service to me is Labhate Param. Labhate Param means, Labha means you're something that you gain, and Param means the greatest thing. And this is almost exactly the same meaning as just a couple of verses back. We heard about this attainment in the yoga process of Labdhopa Shanti. Those who have been paying attention and hearing class, just a couple of days ago. In the transcendental state of Labdhopa Shanti. So Labda, Upashanti, Labda means the same thing. Labha and Labda mean the same thing. That which you gain, that which you attain. And Upashanti means the highest level of spiritual peace. And Labda Param means attaining the supreme thing. They both mean the same thing. Labdopashanti in the Bhagavatam and Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param is the same thing, almost the same words being used. So again, these nice parallels are there between the Bhagavad Gita and what we're discussing now. And when all that's possible in prasanatma, then one's only happiness, no more happiness from sense gratification, one's only happiness is through devotional service. So the yogi does this by very intense sense control, the rules and regulations, breathing, sitting postures, withdrawing the mind, mechanical meditation. And the devotee does this simply by, the yogi who does this, he also has to come to the point of meditating on Krishna, at least meditating on Krishna, because simply meditating on Krishna, this is merely shantaras, passive appreciation of Krishna. But at least the yogi, if he wants the fruit of his yoga practice, has to come to this level. But the devotee, by hearing and chanting and serving and all the things we do in devotional service, automatically attains the same realization. So the same thing is being described. The yogi, he's withdrawing the senses from matter, fixing the mind in meditation. And in today's verse, we hear how the life air is being raised up from the lower chakra, the chakras at the anus and at the genitals, and then the belly and the heart up to the head. So as devotees, we don't have to bother with this imaginary, silly chakra business. But the similar thing is going on. We could understand just from the bodily geography or from the anatomy of the chakras, that the chakra at the anus, we can understand that this is not a very elevated, if situated at the anus, this is not a very elevated level of consciousness. So you raise a little bit, situated at the genitals. This is also a little, maybe better, but this is also not a very elevated level of consciousness. So rise it up through the belly to the heart and up to the, Prabhupada calls the cerebral pit at the top of the head, the 1,000-petaled lotus chakra at the top of the head. So, but devotees automatically, Krishna within the heart, he purifies the devotee completely without this mechanical, imaginary chakra business. Again, I quoted this last week, that a devotee asked Prabhupada, sometimes in meditation, I feel a pressure in my head or a light, or I see 1,000-petaled lotus. Is this real or is this imaginary? And Prabhupada said, if I cut open your head, we're not going to find any 1,000-petaled lotus there. This is simply imaginary to help materially obsessed people fix their mind in meditation. So the devotee accomplishes all of this simply through devotional service. By mad bhaktim labhate param. By mad bhaktim labhate param means you attain the highest thing simply through devotional service. So this is prasanatma. One attains all happiness simply through devotional service. And because of that, renunciation becomes easy as anything. I've also explained this many times, that this is explained in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that when you attain the happiness of devotional service, even at the beginning stage of sadhana bhakti, that's enough happiness to make you able to surpass all the happiness of jnana and karma and yoga and even liberation. Just the happiness of sadhana bhakti. What to speak of the happiness of bhava bhakti, which makes a mockery of the happiness of liberation, or what to speak of the happiness at the level of prema bhakti, which is so intense you can't even perceive any happiness or any attraction from material pursuits or even liberation. So this is prasanatma. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary also explains that there's another meaning of prasanatma. Prasanna also means completely pure. So Brahma Bhuta, prasanatma. At that stage, one's atma, one's soul, body, and mind and heart are all completely pure. He said, just like in Sanskrit, there's the phrase prasanna shalila, which means a completely pure, completely placid body of crystal clear water. Now, this made me think, now in India, it's the autumn season, Sharad season. And during the summer season, all the bodies of water dry up in India, where there's 6 seasons. We count 6 seasons there. And then there's the rainy season. What's that? Varsha season? That's what it's called, Varsha? The rainy season. Then all the rains come, and there's so much rains, and all the rivers and lakes become very full, even overflowing. But because there's so much rain and so much flowing water, it actually stirs up all the silt and dust and mud in the water. So there's lots of water, but all the water is very muddy and cloudy and turbulent. And then the autumn comes, Sharat season comes, and the rains stop, but the water is still present. So all of the mud and dirt settles out of it, and all of the rough waves and overflowing and flooding stops. And the bodies of water are completely smooth like glass. And the water is completely clear like glass, like jewels, crystal clear. So this is the water in the autumn season. So this is Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, also means that your consciousness, your heart becomes like that. In very beautiful book, Light of the Bhagavat, if you haven't read that, this is a wonderful book to read. Prabhupada explaining allegorically all of the description of autumn season from the Bhagavatam. And this is one verse. In autumn, all the reservoirs of water become enriched with growing lotuses. The muddy water again becomes normally clear and decorated, just as fallen conditioned souls once more become spiritually enriched in devotional service. And then he offers this beautiful commentary. He said, we should not be, it's actually a little humorous. We should not be disappointed in our muddy life of material existence. For as soon as we voluntarily take to the devotional service of the Lord, our whole life becomes clear like water in autumn. Devoid of our relationship with God, our life is barren. But as soon as the muddy mind is cleared by spiritual association or cultivation of the human spirit, the threefold miseries of life are at once cleared off. Thus, the lotus of knowledge gradually fructifies, and this gradual process of development ushers in transcendental bliss. So very beautifully, even poetically, Prabhupada is explaining this situation. And this in turn reminded me of another set of verses in the Bhagavatam, which I'll conclude with. These are such favorites of mine, almost my favorite section of the Bhagavatam. These 3 verses, also from the 2nd canto, but later on in the 8th chapter. So maybe we'll get there in a month or 2, couple of months, we'll get there. These 3 verses in a row, so beautifully. Parikshit Maharaj is again inquiring to hear, after hearing, he's heard so much about yoga and Virat Rupa in the 2nd canto. Then he wants to hear more about direct devotional service. And he offers at the beginning of this 8th chapter very beautiful praise of the process of hearing and chanting about Krishna. So this is text 4. He says, Shrinvata Shraddaya Nityam Grinatas Chas Swacheshtitam Kalena Nati Dirgena Bhagavan Vishate Ridi. Shrinvatam Shraddaya Nityam. So Shrinvata, hearing about Krishna. Shraddaya, with great faith. And Nityam means continually, eternally. Grinatas Chaswacheshtitam. And accepting this, how? Swacheshtitam, by your own endeavor. Cheshta means your endeavor. And cheshta also means your mode of life, the way you live. So grinatas swacheshtitam, you're accepting this process of hearing about Krishna with great personal endeavor, swa, by your own endeavor, and also by a mode of life that engages you in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Kalena nati dirgena. If you do that, kalena nati dirgena means Dirgena means like Durga means very hard. So, and Kalena means time. So Kalena Dirgena means a very long time. But Kalena Nati Dirgena means not a very long time, means after a very short time. Bhagavan Vishate Ridhi. You can see the Lord within your heart. So seeing the Lord within your heart, this is the endeavor of the yogis, yes? And for that, they have to do it for lifetimes and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. But by hearing and chanting about Krishna, Kalena Nati Dirgena, after a very short time, if you do it, if you endeavor nicely and you live your life in such a way to cultivate it, then by hearing and chanting about Krishna. Here's Prabhupada's translation. Persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna manifested in their hearts within a short time. So swacheshtita, you do it you live your life in that way and you endeavor in that way, just like in today's actual Bhagavatam verse. This process is described as Vijnanadrik, itamunis tu paramed vyavasito. Vijnanadrik virya suranditasaya. Vijnanadrik is also very interesting. We know Prabhupada would often talk about Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan and Vigyan. Viv means intense or an intensifier. So Gyan and Vigyan means sometimes he would take it to mean theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge, or Gyan and Vigyan, knowledge and wisdom, or theoretical knowledge and realization. He would talk about it like that. And Vijnana Drik makes it even firmer. Drik means to see. Drik, drishta, to see with your eyes. So Vijnana Drik means not just theoretical, but you're actually directly perceiving the absolute truth. That's what Vijnana Drik means. And this is swacheshtitam, that your whole life is absorbed in this. What's the other Vijnana Drik? Rajavidya, Rajaguyam, Pavitramid Mutamam, Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam, Sasukam kartamavayam. Pratyaksha vagamam. Pratyaksha means through the eyes. That Rajavidyam Rajaguyam, the process of devotional service is Rajavidyam. It's the king of knowledge. Rajaguyam, it's the most secret and confidential of all, which we discussed in last week's Sunday feast lecture. Pavitram idamuttamam, it's the most pure thing, and it's the most purifying thing. Pratyaksha vagamam dharmyam, and this process of devotional service is directly perceived, directly experienced by the senses. This is the same thing as Vijnanajik. And what happens? Sasukam kartamavayam. It's so joyfully performed. Again, same thing as Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. All of these ideas are all wrapped up together, controlling the senses, becoming purified, while being positively engaged in devotional service, which gives you such a level of bliss and happiness that controlling the senses becomes as easy as anything. That's also what is Prabodhananda Saraswati says, right? That the senses are like venomous serpents. But when I engage in devotional service, it's like those venomous serpents with their fangs broken. Then they no longer have any effect on me. So anyway, that beautiful verse, the next verse, going back to the 8th chapter, after taking the matter of hearing and chanting seriously, you can very quickly see Krishna in your heart. Then, pravishta karna randrena swanam bhava saroruham dunoti shamalam Krishna shalilasya yata sharat. This is the verse that reminded me of this segment. The sound incarnation of Lord Krishna, the supreme soul present as Srimad Bhagavatam, enters into the heart of self-realized devotees, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and thus cleanses the dust of material association such as lust, anger, and hankering. Thus it acts like autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. So again, this image that the muddy water is there, but in autumn they become crystal clear, just like when you hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And looking at the Sanskrit again, Pravishta Karna Randrena, it enters, the Bhagavatam enters the whole of the ear. And it doesn't just enter the ear and stay there. It enters the ear and then goes into the heart. And it sits on the lotus, this very beautiful poetic image. The lotus of your loving relationship with Krishna is present there in your heart. And it enters there and it causes that heart to blossom. And on that throne upon which we've enshrined Krishna, on that lotus within our heart, all, Prabhupada says, all the lust, anger, and hankering is completely cleansed. This is, what's this? This is nashochati nakanchati, right? No more hankering, no longer lamenting. That's all cleansed because Krishna is there in our heart. We're seeing Krishna there in our heart. Therefore, all the material contamination is gone, just like all the mud, all the muddy water and disturbance in the bodies of water is finished in the autumn season as it becomes completely pure, completely placid. And the final of this series of 3 verses, Dotatma Purusha Krishna Padamulam Namunchati Muktasarva Pariklesha Pantaswa Sharanam Yata. These 3 verses, all very beautiful poetry and incredible metaphors and imagery are being used. A pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart has once been cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, for they fully satisfy him, just as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. I think we can all have experience of this. Even what to speak of a troubled journey, even if you have like a crappy day at work, excuse my French, an awful day at work, you have a bad day at work, and you come home and it's like, oh my God, finally I'm home. I can relax. I can sit back. I could have some nice prasad. I could associate with my devotee family. Oh, what a relief. Oh my God. What to speak of if you've been on a long, long journey away from home and you're away and it's a troubled journey and you come home and this is the full satisfaction. You're fully satisfied by this process of devotional service. And that's why, remember, the yogi who controls his mind mechanically and controls his senses mechanically is not fully satisfied. Rather, because he's not fully satisfied, he must fall down from that position of imagined superiority, patantito najita yusmarangraya, because he's neglecting Krishna's lotus feet. But the devotee who in this verse never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, that person is fully satisfied and he never gives them up. That means he'll never fall down to that gross base platform of sense gratification. Just compare like, who was it, Vishwamitra, who fell down sometimes because of anger or sometimes because of the tinkling ankle bells of some apsara, and compare that with Haridas Thakur, who was also enticed by a beautiful young woman and never for a second was he materially attracted or considered falling down. Rather, not only he didn't fall down, but he purified the person who came to entice him. So this is the power of devotional service, which parallels at every stage the process of yoga as described by Shukadev Goswami, but also at the same time surpasses it at every step. And this all ties back to Prabhupada's original point from today's purport and today's verse. You can't, if you're a Duratma, you can't simultaneously be a spiritualist and cultivate sense gratification. One of them will have to give. So this is the point. This full happiness, prasanatma, comes from devotional service. And that's how we understand whenever we read like these sections of the Bhagavatam or whenever we read the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. That's how we understand all these descriptions of karma, jnana, and yoga. It's all pointing towards somehow or other, yena tena prakarena, mana Krishna nishevayet, fixing the mind on Krishna, because that is the only thing that will actually satisfy us, that will actually enable us to control our senses, and will actually give us the fullest ultimate liberation. Hare Krishna, thank you very much, everybody, for enduring this class and for your kind attention. If there's any questions or comments, we can discuss now. Either raise your hands or just speak up.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Oh, I tell you.
Stay in the left 3 lanes.
I am so exhausted listening to that class. You made me so,
Is that Haryashva?
yes,
oh, Haribol.
I was so greedy trying to drink up everything, and you just kept the nectar coming. I'm exhausted.
You're too kind, Prabhu.
Now, you were pretty much explaining the importance of the internal process of Krishna consciousness and why we have to become internal devotees. And you also were explaining at a certain point about how we're still that the pretentiousness, how we begin to fall away, or we're still attached to the objects of the senses and things like that. So I was thinking, in one sense, even when we're going through the internal process of trying to be a better devotee, it is our problem the fact that we have not yet matured in our Krishna consciousness and taken shelter really of the process. So there's fall down, or when I say fall, temporary, it's just externally we are still attached to the objects of the senses. We're still attached to the bad habits. Is this due to our not taking to the process yet sincerely, or is it also the process of purification coming from attempting to take to the process?
Yeah, that's interesting. Off the top of my head, I'd say it's kind of both. Maybe mute yourself because I'm coming back in an echo. Because we've been sense gratifiers for millions and billions and gazillions of life, then yeah, there's still some of that there. So even as we're practicing devotional service, that's coming up. But also at the same time, like you said, it's also part of our purification. What is it? Prabhupada gave the example. I think that if you start cleaning your room, if you're cleaning your room, when you start sweeping and cleaning and you see it's even dirtier, it's actually dirtier than it even looked before, that you didn't even notice until you started cleaning. Like you pull back the bed and you see all the dust bunnies underneath that you didn't even know you were there. And then when you start cleaning, you see how dirty it really is. But still, you're in the process of cleaning. So as long as you remain in the process of cleaning, then you know it'll get better. So part of it is just, we've been that way for so long that, yeah, it's still hanging in with us. And part of it is that's just what it looks like when you're getting purified. And another thing is, like you said, we have to take responsibility. And that verse I quoted also said, swacheshtitam, that it's also dependent on our endeavor. So also according to how we endeavor will also determine to some degree how and for how long and how intensely these material desires will go on nagging us. And the more and the longer and the more intensely, especially, we take to devotional service, then they'll also be curtailed more. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Reasons, so many explanations of why we're taking
In 10
shelter
miles,
of the
left, convert
process.
onto I-287
You know,
north toward I-87.
One after another, you expect it is the process of Krishna consciousness where the real magic, the real potency is there. Because to the extent, I was just thinking how do I keep my determination, or anyone keeping the determination, let it go deeper, because there's so much that has to be shedded. So many things have to be given up. And we have to keep coming to the conclusion, no, Krishna, I want you. I want you. It was crazy, but it was such a wonderful class. I'm really sorry that I'm so excited, but it was really, really good. And I can only summarize it by saying you were expressing the process of Krishna consciousness, which is internal. It's so internal, and that's why it appeared to me that it's self-realization. We got so much to deal with our own crap, our own lack of affection. So, and even as we're moving up, it's still so much there that we don't want Krishna. So we have to really want Krishna or hear about Krishna. I was excited, man. And you were going everywhere.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for such a wonderful class.
It's good hearing from you, and thanks for your comments and your encouraging words. Any other question or comment? Okay.
I was thinking about,
No, please.
If we have to have the higher taste, and only then we will be able to. So that was my point of meditation. If it's not there, then that's probably because I don't have the higher taste. And that is what I need to keep working towards. And like Haryashva Prabhu says, it was so good to hear from you the importance of devotional service, and that is the only way. And there was one more, of course, the pastime of Sita Mata and the Falgu River, and that, we always hear, and I think Charachandra Prabhu uses Falgu Vairagya a lot. And we always hear, but now I don't think we will ever forget what Falgu Vairagya, because
that's a fun story.
It's a visual now. You pretend that you have renounced, but it has to be real. It has to be from within, and I think it is it's a personal journey. Sometimes, I tend to worry, my kids are not taking this process on, and but everybody has to do it on their own. Like that swachestitam that you said, that was also another point, that I have to desire it for myself, and so everybody else has to desire it for themselves. I cannot desire it for others. And then that's, although tough, has to be done. Bhakta David has his hand up.
Thank you, Mother. Yes, David.
Hi, Hare Krishna. Thank you. I was just reminded, I was telling my students just the other day about, if they're having bad behavior, or they're being angry about something, it's just like somebody putting weights in your hand and pushing you into the water, and you start sinking right to the bottom right away. Just let go of it. Let go of the anger. Let go of the bad behavior, and you and your lecture just it just connected with me. Like, that's what we want to do with our material attachment. Like, we're sinking further and further into the material world, and if we just let go of these attachments, we'll be lighter and lighter to get up out of the depths of the water. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Absolutely, yes, well put. And because we have a tendency, we have to grasp something. So in ignorance, we're grasping, like you said, anger and attachments and so many things dragging us down. But we can't just not grasp anything either. That's the fate of the impersonalists, because they end up grasping material life again. So we have to grasp Krishna. Then, just like also Prabhupada said, if you have a glass of milk full all the way to the very top, then there's no room for any contaminant to enter. So if we're grasping Krishna, then we have no hands, no grip, no fingers, no hands left to grasp anything else. Thank you. Nice. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. It's after 9 o'clock now. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Acharya Prabhu. Thank you. That was a good. Oh, that was just so exciting. I couldn't even sleep,